is being true to yourself. We use the term fidelity as in like, are you monogamous with your partner? But into this term, fidel means to be true, and fidelity means to be true to yourself. Can you actually have an identity that you carry forth and go through with? I think most of the time teenagers develop a sense of identity, because in many surveys where they ask teenagers, are you happy with who you are? Do you want to change the way you look? The later they get, the more likely they're settled, yeah, I'm pretty happy. So by the time they're 19, about 80% of teenagers would already have adopted identity that they're happy with. 19 is probably the year you start going to college. So I think in nowadays, people think that the stage is kind of extended. Okay. Kind of commingled with that is the next step, which is young adults from 20 to 35, which is the age bracket I'm in right now. So this is the challenge that I have to go through. It's finding intimacy in isolation. So basically the central challenge here is the L word. People have to fall in love, find a kind of a soulmate or the one, get married. And not just romantically, there's also a social intimacy that you have to make sure you have a circle of friends you have to be friendly with. If you don't achieve that, if you don't find someone, then you kind of fall into the world of isolation, being separate from everyone else, right? So that's the kind of the main focus of this group. I think Erik Erikson's kind of stages really fall to that cultural time in that time. I think today this stage is kind of extended to post-college, and this one is also extended to your mid to late 40s because people are marrying so much later now compared to in that time. Okay. Any questions at this point? So what are the last two stages in your life? So after you achieve the kind of stability in your developmental stage as an adult, in the middle of adulthood, your conflict is between generativity and stagnation. Generativity is generating positive results. Again, stagnation is not moving. And the basic question you ask at this point of your life is, have I achieved the things that I want to achieve? Right? That very much similar to self-actualization, that you have goals and you have ideals that you want to bring about in this world so you become the best version of yourself. And in your adulthood, 35 to 65, you kind of question your idea of whether you've generated that kind of outcome. It's basically saying, how am I going to make an impact on this world when I die? Is it going to be through my work? Am I going to write that wonderful, great American novel or invent some new theory or an invention? Or maybe I'm going to have children that's going to carry on my legacy and our family name and move on. So that's the generativity. Versus, on the other hand, is stagnation, just being stagnant, not moving, right? So you're kind of stuck in a rut and not achieving the goals that you want to achieve. And that goes on to your 65 years until you're 65. So finally, when you're 65 to until you probably die, the essential conflict there is ego integrity versus despair. So basically, imagine you're retired now and you look back on your life and to kind of figure out yourself to see that, did you live your life to the fullest? When you reflect on your life, do you feel like it's a satisfaction? Is it a success? Or is it a failure? So people who have high in ego integrity would look back on their life and say, you know what, I've tried the best I can, I did very well, I'm fine with dying because I've done so much already. Compare that to despair, which is for people who think they've left a kind of failure life, and they can't really change that now because they're kind of old and 65. So from that, you gain some kind of wisdom, some reflection on your life to see if you really did that well. Okay, so I've outlined kind of the 8 stages. So Erik Erikson says in every stage you have to go through these struggles, conflicts, and hopefully you'll have to come to some understanding of where of one side or the other, hopefully the more positive side. And by leading the more positive side and getting these kind of life lessons, we're going to live a positive life. And when you look back on this, it seems like every movie, these eight steps really encompass most movies you've seen. That it's either someone looking for love, looking for someone to belong, looking for their true identity. So it's kind of a universal story that he's trying to spin here. Like, what is the human experience, right? Just to go through these 8 steps and be kind of come out to be at peace with ourselves. Okay. So I want to talk about the influences of peers and parents on our own development. Right. So as you grow older, who do you think influences us more, our parents or our peers? Again, our peers are people of our same age group. People we go to school with, people we hang out with, our best friends. And you can imagine the story is very similar when you're younger, when you're very youthful, that your parents probably have a stronger influence on you. That you follow their advice a lot, you admire them, and you kind of take on their personality characteristics and work habits religious views, so political views, so on and so forth. You can imagine that when you're in your teenager years and onwards, you're going to spend much less time with your parents, which is true. You start arguing with your parents a lot more, the fights become more intense and prolonged during your teenage years, and you're more likely to be influenced by your peers. So you heard this term before, like teenagers are kind of like pack rats and herd animals. They really follow each other like the trend and whatnot. So things like the way they talk, the way they act, whether they smoke or not, or what they watch and wear, what they eat, are all kind of influenced by their peer group, right? So, but the researchers found that the effects of your parental influence is actually pretty surprisingly long-lasting, that you kind of mimic their political and their religious attitudes, for example. So it's not that they disappear, that you don't rely on your parents anymore, it's just that the influences are much earlier on and much even more longer lasting than people have thought in the beginning. Okay. What else can I talk about the peers? Let me see. Not much more, really. It's pretty obvious that our personal development has developed, a lot of the social aspects of our development is driven by the people that we hang out with most of the time. So it's not like we develop ourselves in a vacuum without the help and support of other people. You have your parental units and your peer group to help you and influence you in those ways. Now, what happens after we finish our kind of teenager years and reach adulthood? So first I want to talk about some of the physical changes that people see when they're becoming older and older. So for example, women, the central biological feature that marks the end of their adulthood and into a more senior time, more autumn-like time, is menopause. That's when their body stops generating eggs, they stop ovulating, they stop having their menstruation cycle.